We're taking a look at the guitar style of Charlie Christian, one of the great pioneers of jazz. We're going to take a look at some of the improvisational techniques that he used in his solos and find out how we can take them and incorporate them into our own solos. Let's get going. So in particular, we're going to look at one of Charlie Christian's solos on the Fats Waller song Honeysuckle Rose. I chose this particular solo because it includes so many of the techniques and devices that Charlie Christian uses in many of his solos. The thing is, Charlie Christian had a certain set of devices that you can find in many of his solos. Of course, he uses them in different ways and manipulates them and permutates them and so on. But I think by examining the solo, we'll be able to find out a lot of the core things that Charlie Christian does in many of his solos. So the first thing we should do, though, is just take an overview of the form of this song. So the song Honeysuckle Rose, it has a 32-bar song form. It's an AABA form. Each of the sections are 8 bars in length. All of the A sections are the same. In this case, they're playing in the key of D flat, and they start with 4 bars of A flat 7, and then they go to 4 bars of D flat major. That's for all the A sections. And then when they get to the B section, they go D flat 7 for 2 bars, G flat major for 2 bars, E flat 7 for 2 bars, and A flat 7 for the last 2 bars. So you can see in this bridge that the harmonic rhythm is doubled up, where we have a chord change every 2 bars instead of every 4 bars like in the A section. So now that you're familiar with the form of the song, I'm going to go ahead and play you the full solo, and then afterwards we're going to take a deep dive into the solo, and we're going to pull out a whole bunch of really cool concepts that we can use. By the way, if you'd like to see more videos like this, go ahead and click that subscribe button and hit the notification bell icon as well so you get notified when new videos are released. We're going to start with the very first line of the solo because in just this line we have 3 or 4 of the core concepts of the Charlie Christian style. The first idea that I want to show you with this opening line is the idea of using the major pentatonic scale against the major chord and sometimes also against the dominant 7th chord. And also the emphasis placed on the 6th degree of the scale, in this case the major 6th degree. So as you can see, the solo opens with this line. And with this line, I want you to notice the emphasis on the note F. Since the chord is an A flat 7, that note F is the 6th degree or the 13th of the scale. And the emphasis on the 6th degree is a very characteristic part of this sound. And then in the 5th bar, over that D flat major chord, you can see here again that he's using the major 6th, in this case a B flat over the D flat major chord. So he's doing this. So underlying these chords is that major pentatonic sound. Over the D flat, D flat, E flat, F, A flat, B flat, D flat. In particular, it's really the sound of the major triad with the added 6th. And then the same thing for the A flat 7. Another nice example of the use of the major 6th degree is in the 13th through 16th bar of the solo over the D flat major chord. He plays this riff. So you can really hear that strong emphasis on that major 6th degree, the B flat over the D flat major chord. So this is a sound that Charlie Christian uses often. In almost all his solos, you can find this kind of sound. And it's a very characteristic sound of the swing era, which he was part of. The next big idea that I want to take from this opening line is the idea that Charlie Christian formulates a lot of his lines based on chord shapes on the guitar neck. So again, that opening line, if we take a look at the notes from that line, we can see that those notes form a chord shape on the neck. They form the upper part of an A flat 7 chord with a 9 and a 13. And what Charlie Christian often does is he'll often base a line around a chord shape like that, but then go ahead and include some additional notes from the scale or from the chord. So in this case, you can see that most of the line uses the notes from this chord shape, but he also includes an E flat, which is the fifth of the A flat 7 chord. So he goes, so the chord is this, but he goes. So this is a great idea for coming up with ideas for your own solo. You can basically take a chord shape and either just simply play through that chord shape, like arpeggiate through it, like if we had this, or take that chord shape and add some additional notes to it to create a longer line. So in his case, he added the E flat, or the fifth of the chord. But what if we took a different note? What if instead we added the root, or the A flat, and we did. So these can be some nice ways to create lines based on chord shapes that you probably already have under your fingers. Another spot we can look at in the solo is in the fifth bar, over the D flat major chord. Here he plays. If you look at this line, you can see that it's basically falling under this chord shape, the D flat major triad, with an added major sixth. So again, the line is. So you can see that I barely have to move my hand when I'm playing that line. All the notes fall really nicely right under that chord shape. One extra little thing I can point out here is that when you saw me play this earlier, you might have seen me play these D flats on alternating strings, like on the first string and on the second string here. So I did. And I wanted to point this out because I've read that Charlie Christian, when he had a single note repeating, he often played that on different strings rather than on one string. Now in this spot, in this solo, I don't necessarily hear him alternating strings on this line, but I wanted to throw that in there just to bring that to your attention. And it's interesting sometimes to take a note like that, where you have a repeating note, and to try it in different ways, to try it just on one string, like, or try it on different strings, like. So sometimes you can just get a different kind of feel, or a different kind of groove going with that. It's just a little bit different of a feel. Now again, let's go to the first line in this solo to see a harmonic technique that Charlie Christian used often. This is the idea of using a minor 7 flat 5 or half-diminished 7th arpeggio starting on the 3rd degree of a dominant 7th chord. So as you can see from the opening line, we're in the key of A flat, and our line again is. Now, leaving out the major 6th for a second, the rest of that line is. If we take a look at those notes, we have C, E flat, G flat, and B flat. And these are the notes of a C half-diminished 7th chord, or C minor 7 flat 5. Both of those can be used interchangeably. And this is a line that's very common in Charlie Christian solos. You'll find this in many, many solos. In fact, we can see this formation of notes a couple more times in this solo. At the end of the 8th bar into the 9th bar, you can see that he uses this same formation of notes, although he does it this time in a descending order. He starts on the note C and goes down the arpeggio. So he goes C, B flat, G flat, E flat, and C again on the bottom. And again, it's just the same notes, but in a different order. It's the notes of a C half diminished seventh chord. C, E flat, G flat, B flat, starting from the top, the root, going down. We can see this exact same harmonic technique being used at the end of the bridge section in the last two bars on the A flat 7 chord. So we'll start on the preceding two bars on the E flat 7 and go into that A flat 7. And listen out for that arpeggio again. So if you heard at the very end of that, you heard. And again, it's that exact same minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio. C, E flat, G flat, B flat, and C against the A flat 7 chord. So the idea is when you have a dominant 7th chord, go up a major third from the root and play off of the minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio, or the half diminished 7th arpeggio. An interesting thing to point out is that Charlie Christian took this same idea and repurposed it to work over a dominant 7th chord in a different way. So sometimes he would use the same formulation of notes, but he would go down a whole step from a dominant 7th chord. Let's look at an A flat 7th chord again as an example. So in the case of an A flat 7 chord, what he would do is he would go a whole step down and play a minor 7 triad with an added 6th. So he would do over an A flat 7 chord. That's G flat, A, D flat, and E flat. So if we had something like E flat minor to A flat 7. So. You can see that this group of notes can be looked at in two ways. The first way is as a minor 7 triad with an added 6th. So we can say G flat minor with an E flat on top, which is a 6th. But if we invert this chord, we can also see it as that same minor 7 flat 5 if we started on an E flat. E flat, G flat, A, and D flat. So what he's doing is he's taking this minor 7 flat 5 or half diminished 7th arpeggio idea and using it in different ways. The first way was a brighter sound where he went up a major third from the root of the chord, of the dominant 7th chord, and played that arpeggio. The second way creates a darker sound where he goes down a whole step and plays a minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio. Now, I want to move on to talking about something that's really characteristic of Charlie Christian's sound, and that is the use of the minor third moving to the major third. Let's look at the 5th bar of the solo for a good example of this. You can see here on the second beat that we have the note E natural moving to the note F. So in this case, the chord is D flat major. The E natural would be the minor third of D flat major, and the F would be the major third. So we have minor third moving to major third. And this riff sounds like this. So you can hear that minor third, major third thing here. And if you look at a lot of Charlie Christian solos, you'll find that he's using this minor third, major third thing all over the place. Now here's another example of this in this same solo in bars 13 through 16. However, here we have the minor third in the form of a grace note. And again, this is something that is very common in Charlie Christian solos. The minor third moving to the major third in the form of a grace note. So this riff sounds like this. But also in this phrase, if you look at the end of the phrase on the 16th bar, you can see again the minor third moving to major third. So the whole phrase sounds like this. So you hear that at the end. To me, this sound is very characteristic of the swing era. Staying on this minor third idea, we can see also at the end of the solo, in bar 30, that he uses the minor third here, but instead of moving to the major third, he uses it more as a blues note. He uses it on its own. And this one sounds like this. You can hear that he places emphasis on that minor third to achieve that really impactful bluesy kind of sound. He does it with a bend. Another way that he uses the minor third idea on a major chord is in the form of a double stop. He'll often take that minor third and layer it with the sixth degree of the chord. So in the case of the D flat major, he'll do the note E as a minor third, but then put in the B flat, which is the sixth, and he'll do something like this. Now you can take that same note combination and just flip the notes around. So you can put the minor third on the bottom and the major sixth on the top to do this. And that's another thing that he does often. So on the D flat major chord, he'll take the note E, which is a minor third, and put the sixth on the top, which is the B flat in this case. Another way that he achieves a bluesy sound sometimes is by using the minor seventh against the major chord. So you can see this again in that same riff in bar 5 over the D flat major chord, where he does this. You hear at the end of that phrase the, so that's the minor seventh moving down to the sixth to the fifth. The next big concept we can talk about is the concept of anticipation, or anticipating the coming chord change. And we can see a good example of this in bars 8 to 9. Often what Charlie Christian will do is he'll anticipate the coming chord change on the previous bar, and often he'll do that just about a beat before the next bar comes. And you can see that he's doing exactly that here. He's coming out of a D flat major chord into an A flat 7 chord, and he sort of prepares the A flat 7 chord by leading into it with the notes C and B flat. And if you look at the full line, you can see that that C and B flat are part of that descending minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio that we talked about earlier. So we're coming from a D flat major chord, and out of that he plays. So it's 1, 2, 3. You hear that line starting on the fourth beat of the previous bar, going into the next bar. And what this does is it sort of creates a feeling of forward movement or propulsion or forward drive. I'm not sure when this idea of anticipating chord changes started, but I know that in the bebop era, Charlie Parker would use this device often. And Charlie Christian did most of his recordings in the year 1939 to 1941. And you can see that this is sort of the transitional point from swing into bebop, with the bebop era occurring during the 40s. So a lot of the language that Charlie Christian uses in his playing can be looked at as sort of a bridge between the swing era into the bebop era. We can see another nice example of this anticipation halfway through the bridge in bar 20. You can see that coming out of that G flat 7 chord, Charlie leads us nicely into the coming E flat 7 chord with the notes G natural and the notes F. And clearly the G natural is not part of the G flat major sound, but rather it's used to propel us into the coming E flat 7 chord. So this line going from the G flat major to the E flat 7 chord sounds like this. What's interesting in Charlie Christian's playing is that you can see that his usage of chromaticism falls sort of in the middle of the swing era and the bebop era. So in bebop playing, a lot of the usage of chromaticism has to do with having the non-chord tones or the non-scale tones fall on the weaker offbeats. And in this way, they're used sort of as chromatic passing tones to get from one note to the next. And you can see that Charlie Christian does use this technique in a lot of the lines that he plays. Check out what he does over the G flat major chord in the bridge. This is the third and fourth bars of the bridge. So here you can see that he connects the notes D flat down to the B flat by way of chromatic passing tones. And the way that he has the notes laid out here, all of the scale tones fall on the strong quarter notes. So over the G flat major, he plays again, and moving on into bars 21 and 22, you can see that he continues the same kind of chromatic approach where the strong scale tones fall on the strong beats. So moving into the E flat 7 chord, he plays. But what I find really interesting is that a lot of the times when Charlie Christian plays chromatic lines, he has the non-chord tones or the non-scale tones falling on the strong beats. And I find that he uses this technique a lot in order to accommodate a descending line. So let's look at bar 9 and 10, for example. Here he's playing over an A-flat 7 chord, and he plays this line. So it sounds like he's ultimately targeting that G-flat at the end, but in order to get there, he's sort of thinking in a larger span of time over the course of that bar, and creating that descending line where some of the non-scale or non-chord tones are actually falling on the strong beats. Take a look at that A natural, which falls on the 3rd beat, and then take a look at the G natural, which falls on the 1st beat. And as you can see, that G natural is not part of the A-flat 7 chord or an A-flat dominant 7 scale or Mixolydian scale. Another example of this is in bar 28. Here he's playing this. So you can see on that 3rd beat that he's playing an A natural, sort of as a way to eventually get to the A-flat, which is the bottom of that D-flat major triad that he plays. So thanks for checking out this video on Charlie Christian. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please give the video a like and consider subscribing to the channel. See you next time.